Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon. We have 14 employees, over 650 titles in print with 20 to 40 new books per year, and we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or maybe you just want to understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to answer a reader question. And that reader question is, I am having a contract negotiation with an author. The author feels that my percentage of the cover price that I'm offering as a royalty seems less than she has been offered from her previous publisher, which is a percentage of net sales. She is concerned mostly that she just wants a fair agreement, and so I want to know, do publishers calculate profits before net? Are there other considerations for this contract negotiation?
So the question is basically, which is more fair, to pay royalties out of gross profits, or not even gross profits, based on the full MSRP, no matter how much you sell it for, or to pay net royalties. There's so many different ways to pay royalties.
There's three, in fact.
What are they?
You can pay royalties as a percentage of the cover price, which is most common, but now most publishers have a little asterisk next to that, and they say percentage of cover price, which is normally 7% of the cover price. Unless, and now because so many sales are deep discount sales, which means like Amazon or Costco or Target or, honestly more and more any other avenue is a deep discount sale, that, they pay lower royalties on those because otherwise the sales would be done at a loss,
So that's type 1.
Those are royalties 1. Royalties 2 is a percentage of net gross, a percentage of net sales. So meaning if the book sells, if it's a 1995 paperback and you sell a copy for $7.18, that's the amount that you pay royalties on, is a determination based on that. So as you can see in royalty 1, 7% is going to seem like a low number compared to, say, 20% of the net sales, because 20% is a larger number than 7%,
But that doesn't necessarily mean that the author is making more on the net sales.
Exactly. And then type 3 is a percentage based on net profits. And so that means that you take the book, you take that $7.18 paid price, that you subtract the printing cost, you subtract, the staff wages, you subtract, all of the costs of advertising and marketing the book. And then typically in those agreements, you split that 50-50 with the author because, the publisher takes the risk and does the work and oversees and uses their expertise. And then the author provides the work itself. And, 50% seems like an even bigger number than 7%, doesn't it?
It does seem rather large.
But in fact, yes, it can be very much, all of those contracts are more or less just different ways to arrive at the same thing. You're essentially always going to get more or less the same amount of royalties. I hate to tell you, dear author, from writing a book, because there's just not more money in it than that. And if you have somebody, so this is the problem, which I believe our person asking this question comes from, is that when you have a micro press, one of the things that you do is that you have these deceptively generous royalties because you want to be cooler than the big houses and you want to be more gracious to the author, because there's been this sort of false schism manufactured mostly by Amazon between author and publisher to say that the publisher is greedy and difficult and doesn't really need to be. And so, but the problem of this, of course, is that over time, it is quickly revealed that every copy is sold at a loss once a micropress has things like staff and, has to pay a telephone bill every month and, has to cover essentially the costs of co-op and marketing and, various aspects of being a publisher.
So what are fair royalty rates for very small presses to offer?
So, in that, it all depends. I guess that's the thing. So, honestly, when it comes down to it, I do feel that the 7 to 8% of cover is a fair royalty because it tends to be 3 times what the publisher earns per copy of the book.
Unless the publisher mostly sells to Amazon or big box stores.
Yeah, in which case there's probably an asterisk next to it anyway. But in those cases, right, it is, those contracts are being changed anymore because, it's just unsustainable to sell that way. And then, part of it too is just, you have all these, it's like I said, you have Amazon driving a wedge between these relationships to say, we offer 70% royalties, which is like the greatest lie, perhaps perpetuated in the history of humanity.
70% of $3 is
it's like
a great percentage, but not much money.
It's also just it's like 70%. Asterisks.
Right.
Because there's so many exceptions to that rule. And, the reality of the situation is there's no way to sell as many copies of a book as having a publisher, as having a traditional print, publisher supporting your work. Statistically, it is going to drive you far better, and your dollars, which is the royalty aspect that you're, or at least should be much more concerned about than your percentage, is going to be higher than it will be with Amazon. And there's just no way about that. There are not exceptions as much as people will try to tell you that there are. You have just over and over example after example where the, people go from one direction to the other, and that direction is to a publisher because nobody else can print and market paper books like a book publisher for obvious reasons. And, people frequently criticize me as saying that because I have a dog in that fight, but I don't want to publish those books. I want what's in the best interest of the author, which is a publisher.
I have more math questions.
Excellent. I want to throw one more thing in there first, though. So the most important consideration for a publisher when you're having this conversation is the author just basically wants to know they have a fair deal. Mm-hmm. So, like, walking them back to that and letting them know, letting them see sometimes example math that shows them that they are getting a fair deal will often abate any concerns.
And this is one reason why we make profit and loss sheets for each book, right? Because we can figure out like what is a fair royalty based on what markets we expect that book to sell in. Mm-hmm. My question, more basic math question, is like, so if a 7% royalty on retail price is fair, assuming that most sales are at like normal discounts, what is the equivalent of that for net sales and net profits based royalties?
Excellent question, Ellie. So I do feel that 50% of net profits is fair. But as you might have alluded to by my previous statements about mathematics and percentages, that is only to the author. It's actually to the author's detriment if sales are below average or even average. It doesn't really come out to be in the author's benefit until the book has really sold through a few times, at which point, that probably, adds 50% to 100% to your royalty depending. And depending how, like, business savvy your publisher is. So, maybe let's hang on to 50% there.
But for net profits, just to be clear, what expenses do you deduct from that before you... Because I know...
So that would be all of a press's expenses pertaining to that book. So that's the editor, that's the designer, that's any kind of production, that's any kind of advertising or marketing, that's... there's quite a bit in terms of, they're probably not able to back bill you freight costs and warehousing costs, but those are material costs as well. So typically what a publisher will do is like factor in a portion of a bottom line, those are like fixed monthly costs that they have to pay for staff to do things like answer the telephone and, work out what is, what went wrong on this shipment, and things like that.
Okay, so 50% is fair, but probably won't actually be better for the author unless the book is a blockbuster. Mm-hmm. And then what about net sales?
So 10%, I would say, is fair in net sales. You're gonna see, again, if you see numbers that are higher than that, I would be concerned, because once again, it means your publisher is not, you can't simultaneously effectively distribute a book into the trade and or any kind of retailers and pay royalties realistically above 15% of net sales, because any more than that and you're losing money on every book, or that means your publisher is disincentivized from actually selling and distributing the book, neither of which you want. You want, again, your royalties column to be focusing on the dollar sign line, not the percentage line.
And so how does Microcosm do it?
So we offer a variety of choices. We have a sort of an a la carte thing where we had a number of authors that did say, I want, a simplified version. And we said, okay, it will probably result in you earning less. And the authors typically said, oh, okay, sure, I'm having doubts about if anyone will want my book anyway.
Oh.
And in every single one of these cases, the author ended up earning less than they would have by just taking our most popular agreement, which is taking 15% of net after the printing cost. And so we only deduct fixed costs that are specific to that book, which is in 99% of cases only the printing bill.
Right. Once in a while, it also includes, we'll print a postcard or something.
Yeah. And so those are, pretty straightforward agreements. That tends to be in the author's benefit 85% of the time is the best deal. And that's just really once you sell more than 1,500 books, that's the way, that's the best deal. Because you aren't going to see recurring expenses. You're only going to see more money with time, It's a pretty good gig. And then our highest tier is the aforementioned 50-50 after all expenses deal. And we have, I think, 2 people ever that have taken us up on that. And that is really only, which is, I guess, about right. And I guess we don't have enough sales history to really know if they won the lottery or not. But that it really only is best for our top 1% of authors who would want that. And really they have to sell over, let's say, 50,000 to make that in their favor. And at the lowest tier, that is severely against their favor. And then in the middling tier, it's just slightly against their favor. So, we've mathed that out for them, but yet most authors still don't really, I don't know if it's because this is like a rare moment where, most of the time when you work with a publisher as an author, your goals are aligned. But this is a rare moment in contract negotiation where your goals are not aligned. So, for the most part, when an author expresses concern at your contract or your royalty agreement especially, they just want assurance that you're giving them a fair deal. They just want to feel like you're not ripping them off because, that's sort of it's not that they have any particular stars in their eyes. It's more just, they want to know that they're not going to be having misgivings down the road.
Most straightforward one versus the more and more complicated ones. Which ones are better for the author or publisher? How do you decide which one to do?
Well, the 50-50 one is best for the publisher because they won't ever be in a situation where they're selling a book at a loss.
Right. And when is it better for the author?
I mean, they're all essentially the same for the author. They're just essentially variations on a theme. The author, sometimes the author will like the simplicity of, all they really need to be reported is a quantity of books. And sometimes, they want to really be maxing out on each copy. But, again, there just isn't much money in per copy to, go anywhere. But, when you're splitting it between the publisher and the author. So, It's a case-by-case basis, essentially, and it's how the book is being marketed and sold that depends. If every copy is going through Amazon, then, the publisher is, at the end of the day, getting probably about 40% of the cover price, so they couldn't afford to pay you, 7% of the cover price. And because then they can't afford to pay the printing and to keep their lights on, and, they're disincentivized from distributing your work, essentially. Because essentially the most common agreement, is fundamentally fair up to a point where, we can, it's still fair. It's just that this one would be more in the author's benefit beyond that point. And that point is, in most cases, is $50,000.
Royalties are fun.
Well, that makes one of us.
I'm not the one who has to administer them.
And on that note, thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub.
On Twitter at Microcosm.
On Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
And here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.